At the funeral, the mother hears her baby cry, and she still can't believe what occurred. The doctors had already proclaimed the infant dead. Brantley, a sleepy little town with strong traditions and a special brand of camaraderie, had just gone dark. It was a spectacle of unadulterated love and anticipation taking place in the little but immaculate municipal hospital. At the age of 28, Mary was prepared to receive the greatest gift that life could provide her, a son. Her eyes sparkled with joy, and her smile was beautiful. As a tidal wave of excitement washed over the room, her husband Ethan stood by her side, gently grasping her hand. "We'll get through this together, love." A guarantee of unwavering support was conveyed silently by the man's words and his tight grasp. An almost palpable excitement pervaded the space, as Mary's vital signs were monitored by medical monitors. The aroma of the clean room blended with the gentle beeps of those devices. With a blend of solemnity and exuberance, the nurses gathered around, each cognizant of the impending greatness of the event. As the woman felt each contraction, she drew nearer to the time when she would meet her son. Despite the agony of the labor, even though she was in so much suffering, she found solace in her husband. "My sweetheart, I am here." Ethan attempted to seem caring while he said, "You're doing incredibly well," but his emotions got the best of him. He had an unusually overpowering sense of powerlessness as he could do nothing but observe his wife go through the agony of giving birth. The obstetrician, Dr. Simmons, entered the room, and the atmosphere immediately became more serene, as if she could dispel the stress that had been building up. "Mary, the finish line is in sight." She spoke with an increasingly loving smile, promising that soon you would be holding tiny Jake. The hands of the clock appeared to twitch between incredibly fast and painfully slow rates as the hours ticked by. Mary was getting closer to the moment she had hoped for with every contraction and deep breath. At last, Dr. Simmons made the announcement that little Jake had arrived. "Please, please, please, it's done, great job," praised the physician as he extracted the infant and escorted him and the nurses directly to the cradle. But there was a problem. A thunderous stillness enveloped the space. In place of the anticipated lullaby of a newborn, a single second felt like a lifetime due to the prolonged stillness. In anticipation of the unheard scream, all eyes were locked onto the attending physician. Feelings of expectation, shock, concern, and profound sadness flashed across the doctor's face in a flash. With a barely detectable motion, she swallowed. "Is everything okay?" the mother questioned, her heart thumping with concern. Weak and gasping, the pessimism that had once shrouded Dr. Simmons's once confident look had returned. She gave it another go, gently pressing the infant's tiny chest in the hopes, and prayers, that she would get some indication that everything would be okay. But the silence lingered unsettlingly. She raised her head to meet the distressed parent's gaze. A crushing weight descended onto her chest. Among all the tasks she had been assigned, this one was certainly the cruelest. The physician inhaled deeply, bracing herself for what was about to happen. She said, her voice breaking, "Mary, Ethan." She hesitated, searching for the perfect words, but what could possibly make such a tragedy seem less harsh? The mother's eyes met the doctor's, still full of optimism, but with a hint of bewilderment and worry starting to well up inside of her. As if to protect her from the impending storm, the father firmly grasped his wife's hand. "I apologize sincerely." Dr. Simmons's speech was barely audible above the droning beep of the nearby monitors. "We did everything we could, but your baby, he didn't make it," she said in a tremulous voice. There was an unbearable silence for a while. "How come? How? What are you trying to say?" The room rang with the parents' dejected and incredulous cries. Mary felt the ground give way beneath her feet as her ears began to ring loudly, masking Ethan sobbing next to her. Neonatal hypoxia was the problem that Jake had experienced. It is a disorder that develops when an infant does not get enough oxygen before, during, or soon after delivery. We made every effort to help, but the damage to his heart was just too great. "I truly apologize." Despite being unbiased and lucid, her explanation seemed insignificant in comparison to the startling actuality. The mother was in a state of shock that appeared to have swallowed her, preventing her from facing the heartbreaking reality of her loss. Even though she could feel the warm tears flowing down her cheeks, in order for her to see the kid at least once, the doctor took him and gave him to her. The young woman raised her gaze to her little Jake. The small, silent creature in her arms, so still, so perfect, it seemed as though Mary's heart had been pierced by a frigid dagger. Her spirit was torn apart by an excruciating pain that replaced her shock. The scream that was stuck in her throat came out as a low moan. She had tears running down her face as she held her little, quiet son. The nights she spent picturing what her baby's face would look like and her dream of becoming a mother were gone. In their place was a sadness that filled her whole being. There was so much pain that she thought she would never be able to breathe or live again. Every time her heart beat, it hurt to remember that her little Jake's heart wasn't beating with it. Just a moment ago, her world was full of hope and joy. Now, it was broken. Mary couldn't handle the fact that Jake was no longer there. She held on to the pain and let it consume her because it was the only link she had with her beloved son. Following that, the evening was a jumble of sobs and tears. While nurses came and went, they said nice things and looked sympathetic, but all the couple could do was hug each other, lost in the emptiness that Jake's death had caused. The small town was hit with the sad news of the baby's death like a storm the next day. For Brantley, the storm came in the form of a small white box, which stood for an end that was both sudden and unfair. The sad news about little Jake quickly spread through the town, making everyone feel heavy. Mary was at the center of this storm. She was in terrible pain now, instead of the happiness that had been pouring out of her just a few hours before. Her eyes were sad because she had lost someone she loved. They used to be full of dreams and hope. Ethan was also feeling very upset, but he was trying his best to support his wife, who had just given birth and still had cuts from the birth. But he knew he had to be strong, even though it felt like the ground had left under him. The house, which had been full of hope and happiness before, now had a sad vibe. It wasn't long before neighbors and friends showed up, each with comforting words and food. This kind of community spirit was typical of the small town. "I'm sorry, Mary and Ethan," an old woman who lived across the street, Mrs. Perkins, said. Jake was very loved. The parents found it strange that the words were spoken in the past tense, which was a fact they were still having a hard time accepting. Getting ready for the service was very hard. The small white coffin, the flowers, and the cemetery were all like a knife wound. Couple leaned on each other as they said goodbye to their son in the most respectful way possible. They were both very sad and determined to do so. The funeral was held at their house, and the sky was dark and gray, as if nature understood how sad Mary and Ethan were. In the living room, everyone was quiet. They spoke softly and had tears in their eyes. The young mother held Jake's small box, and each beat of her heart hurt. "He was loved so much," Mary said in a whisper. "Yes. And he always will be," Pastor Thompson told the woman, putting a calming hand on her shoulder. "He'll be watching over you from heaven." The words made me feel better, but they couldn't take the place of the child who had died. Mary walked toward Jake's small grave with her husband by her side. Every step was a hard journey. For the mother who was sad, the service was a blur. She was in front of the people sitting in her living room, listening to the preacher speak. But she didn't understand what he was saying. Everything seemed far away and pointless. It was just the terrible pain in her heart that she could feel. They went to the graveyard after the service. The tiny plaque with the name, Jake, carved into it was ready for the small white coffin to be pulled up to it. In honor of little Jake, a young tree stood next to it. It was a sign of life in the midst of sadness. But the promise didn't make the parents feel better. Mary kneeled next to the small grave, and tears kept pouring out of her eyes and wet the fresh ground. Ethan was next to her, also very sad but trying to be strong for her. Why? The girl asked in a whisper as she cried. The small coffin slowly began to fall. The sound of the mechanism seemed to reverberate through the graveyard, making it very quiet. It was becoming clear to her that she would never see her child again. Mary was shocked and couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then her anger grew, and she screamed, "God, give me back my son," with all her might. Right then, there was a loud clap of thunder. It was a clear day with no clouds in the sky, but the sound could not be missed. Everyone was interested in what happened. At that moment, an incredible sound, a baby's cry, filled the air. It was soft, but clearly human. People were too shocked to move for a moment. Mary turned her head to try to figure out where the noise was coming from. Then she realized that the sound was coming from the small box. which was now standing about halfway to its final resting place. The woman and her husband screamed and ran to the coffin. They pulled it back up, opened the lid, and looked inside. It didn't seem possible, but little Jake was crying and moving inside the box, wrapped in a blanket. Everyone in the graveyard looked at each other with wide eyes. The graveyard had been sad, but all of a sudden it was full of surprise. And the parents felt relief and joy. What did happen, though? A time of grief and sadness should have happened, but instead there was a lot of energy. There were shouts of surprise, cries of relief, and a lot of running around in the graveyard. It had been quiet and peaceful before. The baby was quickly taken out of the box and wrapped in a warm blanket while Ethan ran to his car to call for help. As Mary held the baby in her arms and cried tears of joy, she hugged her gift. "Oh, my love. Mommy's here," the young woman said, unsure of whether to laugh or cry. The medical staff was waiting to evaluate Jake when they got at the hospital. When Dr. Simmons saw the child, his once sad eyes were suddenly filled with sheer incredulity. She quickly completed the necessary exams after picking up the infant. Everyone considered each breath he drew and each beat of his tiny heart to be a miracle. The hospital waiting area was tense and anxious as the testing started and they awaited the findings. Mary was now waiting with the people who had previously shared her suffering and her hope. Everyone was waiting to see how little Jake was doing, and the stress was evident. After what seemed like an eternity, Jake had returned to life. Looking puzzled, Dr. Simmons emerged from the examination room. She drew the parents aside and started to give an explanation. "I'm at a loss for words. Jake's testing reveal no issues. His lungs are working normally, and his heart is pumping rapidly," she said. "It's unbelievable," her voice trembling with shock. But she didn't stop there. "The medical team and I came up with a notion after careful consideration. It's possible that Jake experienced Lazarus syndrome. It is the natural restart of blood flow following cardiac stoppage." She stopped, glancing at the startled pair before moving on. "Usually, this occurs minutes or, at most, an hour or two following the issuance of the death certificate. However, what's happening to Jake? Well, that's something I've never seen or heard of. It nearly seems miraculous." The hope and disbelief in the couple's eyes shined brightly. In her quest for a rational answer, the physician had discovered one that appeared to go against the grain of science. However, the fact that their young son was safe was what mattered most to Mary and Ethan. All that mattered was that their tiny wonder was breathing and living. Word of the baby's resurrection immediately got around Brantley. Everywhere they walked, the mother and child were met with astonished stares and muttered voices. Their lives became well known as a result of the story being covered by regional media and even a few national television networks. Joy and adoration brought Brantley's residents together, who had already been bound by their common pain. Jake's story was more than just news to many in the local religious community. It was a miracle, an indication that there was something more than human comprehension. Following a Thanksgiving service at the local church, the infant came to be seen as a representation of faith and optimism. Conversely, the medical community was perplexed. Physicians from throughout the nation were summoned to examine the situation, even though Lazarus syndrome was the most likely explanation. It still didn't feel real. Mary and Ethan, meantime, gazed with wonder and appreciation as everyone else attempted to explain the unexplainable, but none of that was actually important to that mother. Joy and relief welled up in her heart. Her beloved kid, Jake, was still alive. Like any other infant, he was crying, eating, sleeping, and developing. Every chuckle, glance, and touch from her young boy was a miracle. A sense of excitement and love suddenly permeated the house, which had previously been gripped by an overwhelming grief. One strange thing, though, was that thunder cracked the sky just as Mary cried out for her son. No one knew why. That was the one thing that stuck out in everyone's memory the most, as if the cosmos were listening to a distressed mother's cries for help. A resounding clap of thunder broke the calm sky that day despite the lack of a storm warning. Nothing out of the ordinary was documented that day, according to local meteorologists consulted, further adding to the event's inexplicability. The mysterious event, the sudden clap of thunder, became a legendary aspect of Jake's story. An element of the mystique, the wonder, was that it became. Scientists couldn't make sense of it, so they labeled it an enigma for the religious community. It was additional proof of a miracle, a direct response to the mother's cries for help. Like the baby's return, the thunder was an enigma that would live on in memory and conversation but never have its true meaning explained. Mary sat back and enjoyed seeing her little boy develop over the years. His infectious laughter and vibrant, inquisitive eyes brightened the home. He was a beacon of hope for her, showing her that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Life continued as usual in Brantley. As time went on, the commotion surrounding the restored infant subsided, but no one ever forgot Jake's tale. The tale of their kid was an inspiration to the parents. It was a tale of love, faith, and hope, a tale that showed the residents of Brantley that unexpected things can happen in life regardless of how difficult things seem. After watching the story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comment section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.